Hey, my glamorous new host. What a treat.
Might look a bit different.
You look very different. Fantastic to have you here, Shah.
Nice debut.
Debut Tech for Good hosting. So yeah, Shah is very much normally this side of the table, not this.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Finally coaxed her onto this side, which is
my first and last, maybe.
No,
Not with this
not.
panel, 100% not.
So Pancake Day.
Favourite day of the year.
How many pancakes are you up to so far?
So we only had one. Managed to get them in. I managed to persuade work to order them in, so that was
Yeah, I
good.
did see a few pancakes flying around earlier.
Literally
Flying around.
But I will have more later, obviously.
Will
You're
you?
savoury or sweet pan. Oh, you're not a massive pancake.
I'm a gluten free, which is like the worst day.
Straight into an intimate conversation. I'm gluten free.
So pancake day is not my kind of day of the year, to be honest.
I will eat on your behalf.
Yeah, thank you. If it was like normal, I do like a bit of lemon and sugar. I'm
Yeah,
quite
nice.
straightforward. Or go for the chocolate and banana, that kind of vibe.
Nice. Bit of fruit
Yeah.
in there, mix it up.
Yeah, the odd strawberry maybe thrown in, you know,
Get your daisy.
go a bit wild, you know, whatever kind of thing you fancy. So, well, I hope everyone at home is also planning their pancakes that they will be having later. I think we're just giving it a couple more minutes for people to join and make sure everyone's got in from the Zoom link okay, and then we are going to kick off, and you may see some of our wonderful panelists joining as well, who it won't be long, we will get them all introduced to you shortly.
I mean, this is definitely not an event to miss if I say so myself. But
I know.
So
It's been a very exciting one internally, I must say. It's the first one we've ever had at an hour and a half.
yes.
Yeah, so this is the first time we've actually extended a Tech for Good talk because we had so much we wanted to get out of the amazing brains of our panelists. We've got some more time to do that, so dream come true.
Exactly.
So hopefully everyone can stay with us for the hour and a half, and I think we can probably kick off now.
Yeah, no time. Bit more time.
Hold on, we're very excited. They're having to rein us back,
Exactly.
wanting to kick off and get the conversation going, but we will give it a couple more minutes to let everyone come in. So yeah.
Exactly.
And then Shah's debut can officially commence.
You're putting too much pressure on it now.
Amazing. I think probably that's about time.
We've been given the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to our February, it's not February, it's March Tech for Good Talks, which is all around women in tech. So these are digital events that we host every month. We've been doing it for around 2 years now, but this is one we are particularly excited about. So my name is Shah, I'm the head of marketing here at Three Sided Cube.
My name is Gabby and I head up commercial at Three Sided Cube.
So I just wanted to give a bit of a rundown of what we're going to be looking at. We won't spend too much time on the upfront section because obviously we've talked about got this amazing panel today. So we will be just giving sort of a brief overview of Three Sided Cube and all the work that we do, and then going to be talking about International Women's Day 2022. And a bit of an insight on Cube as well. We will then be passing over to the amazing panel if we haven't bigged it up enough. And just a reminder that there are that you can ask questions if you have one throughout the whole event, but there will be dedicated time at the end to ask your questions. But first of all, I'll pass over to Gabs.
Yeah, so we've mentioned who we are, but you may be asking yourself, who is Three Sided Cube? So Three Sided Cube, we are a software development agency. We're based on the south coast of England in a place called Bournemouth. I would usually say sunny Bournemouth, but trust me, it is not that sunny today. We predominantly specialize in mobile app development and digital platforms, but what differentiates us is that we're mission-led. Our mission is to change millions of lives for the better, and we do that by building tech for good. Because technology is a super powerful tool that has, huge potential for reach and impact, but the technology itself is agnostic. The technology doesn't care if it's used for good or for bad. So we choose to align ourselves with our wonderful clients who are, they have all that expertise, the knowledge, the audiences, and the reach to develop technology, software, and work on projects where impact and changing lives for the better is at the heart of what we're all doing. Quite a lofty challenge, you're probably thinking to yourself, for 60 cubes based in the south coast of England. But yes, it is, but we know we can do it because we already are. We've got incredible clients, and just to name a few, including the American Red Cross, the World Resources Institute, Global Disaster Preparedness Centre, and the UN. One of our clients is actually UNHCR, who are the refugee agency and have been very active, as you will have seen on the news in the last few days, working out in Ukraine to protect people. So very proud of the projects that we work on and our awesome clients. So as you can see, we're in the for good space. So highlighting really powerful topics we're passionate about is what these Tech for Good talks are about. And, you know, personally, I think we want to say, you know, women in tech is something we're particularly passionate about sharing and opening up a wider conversation about.
Absolutely, hit the nail on the head there, Gabs. So for those of you who didn't know, next week is International Women's Day, and this is a day to celebrate the cultural, economic, political and social achievements of women. The theme of this day next week is to break the bias. So it's hashtag break the bias. You'll probably see it on social next week. And this is all around aiming for a gender equal world, sort of free from bias and discrimination. So this is obviously a day that can be celebrated by both men and women. You know, it's so important. And since the 1990s, obviously we have made steps forward, but we're not there yet. I was reading the other day that I think it's 4% of the statues in London are of women, which is a horrific stat. And so what we wanted to do was really focus on that. And obviously, as we are in the tech space, we wanted to focus on women in tech, because this is an industry that is extremely underrepresented. So obviously we are women in tech, so everything from developers all the way to commercial marketing. And we'll be sharing some stats later in a video around this sector. But first of all, we wanted to talk a bit about Three-Sided Cube. So 38% of Three-Sided Cube is made up of awesome women. So on paper, this is, you know, the stat isn't as high as we'd like it to be. We are 100% not perfect, and we're definitely not claiming to be. And there's still a lot for us to do in order to get that 50-50 split or more. However, when you do compare it to the industry average, it is great to see that, you know, Three-Sided Cube is a lot higher than that. Ninja Devil, my maths isn't too quick, but and that we're sort of working towards trying to get that higher.
Yeah, and following on from that, kind of, for some people might be quite shocking industry average representation. Just one of the things I wanted to highlight a little bit was something that we do at Cube called Cube Academy. And really, Cube Academy is a key part of our young talent acquisition program. So it's really important to us that we're giving young people an opportunity in the industry. And one of the things that's slightly different about what we do from other internships and mentorship programs, certainly the ones that I was on a few years back, quite a few years now, is that Cube Academy, they really are onboarded exactly like any other member of the team. They work on the projects that everyone else is working on, and working on active client-based, client-facing projects. So it's not kind of like answering the phones and getting a sense and doing tea runs and things like that. This is real experience. But one of the key things that occurred to me when we were preparing for this event was, this is an incredible program, and one where we get some of our really incredible cubes come through that then graduate from Cube Academy and become full-time cubes and working their way up the kind of ladder at Cube. One of the things is we have a really gender imbalance with what we're seeing people come through to Cube Academy, whether that is education, representing the tech industry as a really powerful career option and opportunity for women at schools, or whether it is that the industry isn't opening their doors to women as much. We have had, you know, a couple of fantastic women come through this program, but it's a significantly outweighed by the amount of men that have come through this program. And one that we are going to really actively focus on, because as Shah said, that 38% of women that represent Cube, we want to make that higher. And this feels like a really key place that we can make sure, you know, if there's anyone listening today that's looking for inspiration to get into the industry, there are lots of opportunities to learn really what it's like to be in the industry. And we would encourage anyone to apply for certainly our Cube Academy.
Yeah, absolutely. So enough of us now. We are going to pass over to the panel. So we've got an absolutely amazing panel, but I will let them introduce themselves. First, we have got a video to share with you all. Just a note that obviously we are doing this over Zoom, so there might be a slight lag, but we will be sending out after, so you can watch it in your free time.
Hello, so thank you for that video and everyone that was involved in creating that for us. So it is panel time, the wait is over. We can get you introduced to our incredible panelists that have joined us here today. I am going to let them introduce themselves in a little while. I just wanted to do another little reminder at this stage that please do share your questions. Please do pop them in the Q&A facility, and we will make sure we can try and get those answered as we go through. And alternatively, we are going to leave some time at the end to make sure we get through those questions. So please do pop those in as we go along. So without further ado, let's get our wonderful panelists introduced. So I'm just going to go around my screen. So don't anyone think I've got favourites. Priscilla, you are top of my screen. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role?
Yes, I saw myself right at the top there. I didn't know if that was going to be the case for you, but I guess it is. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's just really great, an important panel to be a part of. So just to kind of give you guys some background on who I am, my name is Priscilla, as we know. I work as Head of Community and Social Media for Yazy. So Yazy is a fintech app that's centered around sustainability, and our mission is to help people understand more about their carbon footprint. So I know some people might see like kgs and words flying around and they're just like, what even is a carbon footprint? Like, where do I begin with all this stuff? So we try and really make it something that people can understand. So when you download the app, we also provide things like equivalents. So we'll let you know it's like 100 cups of coffee, just so that you're able to really quantify it in the best way possible. So yeah, that's our mission, is to definitely help people. And this panel, as I said, is something that's really important, and I'm very glad to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, and we love Yazy, so thank you so much for joining us today. Janet, you are next on my screen, so could you please do a little introduction for everyone?
Sure. My name is Janet Tong. I have now been a woman in technology for 30 years, all with one company, IBM. Obviously, as you can imagine, to last that long in one company, I have had a myriad of different roles over those 30 years. I started as technical. To be totally frank, I started as a temp to get some little bit more money to go traveling again. And the IBM machine sort of chewed me up, and it hasn't spat me back out yet. About 10 years ago, I moved into a management role, via a sort of team leader avenue. I've had a number of different management roles. I am now a senior, although we tend to not use that when you get to this ripe old age in your title, development manager and design manager. And my team work on Kix transaction server predominantly. which if anybody knows anything about mainframes, is the thing that runs most of your cash points and, you know, all the major bank businesses, etc., etc.
Wow, very cool. Soph, you are next on my screen.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie, so I work at Three-Sided Cube. I am the production director here, which means that I oversee the project managers, the creatives and the developers. So I joined Cube just under 10 years ago now, and joined as, I was operations manager, but there was only about 6 of us at the time, and it kind of was anything that was needed, primarily buying a printer instead of a candy floss machine, which was the first thing that they had on the desk. And then worked my way up to production director, which I absolutely love. Prior to working in Cube, I worked in subprime finance, which was fun. So I've always been in male-dominated industries. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here today.
Thanks, Soph. Prabha.
Hi, I'm Prabha. I was until very recently the head writer and managing editor for Siri at Apple, so Apple's voice assistant, if you're not familiar. I have spent my entire career working in content and editorial and managing them. I was on mute for a second there. Am I okay now?
Yes, you're back on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And so just a little bit of background about my role at Apple. As head writer and editor there, I led the global team of writers responsible for putting words in Siri's virtual mouth across every language and locale in which we operated. Again, as I said, I've always worked in content editorial teams. I'm much more comfortable writing than I am speaking, but even so, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have so many questions for you all already, but I'm going to hold myself back. Caroline.
Hi there. My name is Caroline Mora. I am joining you from Brooklyn, New York. So if you hear any background noise, there are some things happening outside of my window, so apologies for that. I am currently the director of product management at a nonprofit, and have been doing this work for about 2.5 years now. Before that, I was working as a product lead at a variety of different consumer tech companies, and actually got my start in this work at the American Red Cross, which is where I crossed paths with Sophie and Three-Sided Cube for the first time. So really glad to be reunited with this team today, and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Amazing to have you here. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Webb. I have been working at the intersection of tech and climate change for the last, since 2007. And before that, I was working in policy and in tech. So I've done both, started in startups in Tokyo and in New York, worked for Oxygen Media back in the day, which was kind of revolutionizing media for women and girls back in 2000. And then I did an environmental policy degree, worked in policy for think tanks, set up my own NGO in 2015 to focus on energy transitions with startups. And now I've started my own startup, YoYu, which is focused on providing a clean energy hourly forecast and letting you save carbon by avoiding the highest carbon intensive times of day. So it's been a varied career so far.
No, it's incredible. I mean, we've got so many skills on the panel and such a global representation as well. It's, I'm super excited to kind of kick off and throw some questions your way and get you all chatting amongst yourself, really. So the first question, and where kind of we wanted to start this panel conversation, is to kind of take a minute to discuss like why you all personally, having experienced what it's like to be a woman in the industry, why you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry. Obviously, it's why we're here today, and it's an interesting starting point to, as women doing it, to see if there's similarities and differences amongst what you think. So I don't know where to start. I might just start at the top, Priscilla. You've definitely sat in the wrong space, or the best space, I'm not really sure. So from your point of view, why do you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry?
Oh no, you've got me. I'm in the wrong spot. I'll swap seats with Caroline if I could, but not possible virtually, is it? Yeah, really good question. Really, really important question as well. I guess the first thing that I would say is important to look at is why businesses exist in the beginning. Like, we have to look at them as solutions for people, right? So if we alienate a certain group of people, or we don't have them in the space, then what we do is we're saying that we're going to allow, in this instance, men to answer for solutions for women, or for Black people, or for whatever the minority group is in that space. So I think it's just really important to see it that way. It's like if I walked into a room and they said, the only people that are allowed to sit down are people with blue eyes, then I'm not being catered to. And you send this indirect message to people with blue eyes that they are more important than anyone that doesn't have blue eyes. And I think that's what we need to look at. Like, why is representation important? Why is it important that we have Black people in the room, that we have non-binary people in the room, that we have women in the room? It's so that when we come up with these solutions, we bear in mind the various needs of these groups. And then that way you're able to make a better and more well-rounded solution when you're putting out your business. So I think that's the main thing. It's like, if we ignore, you know, women, or if we ignore our voices, then we're not going to be there, and therefore we're using things that weren't really created for us, and you're not really consulting with us on products that you're making for people like us as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message, and definitely one that resonates with the user-centered design that we do and the thinking that we do internally. And I won't go into that because Sophie will, I'm sure, fill in the gaps a little bit around that. So do you want to dive in? Because I've kind of like just thrown you under a bus there by sort of trying to make you answer a question.
No, that's fine. No, got the bus track, thank you. No, I mean, but really, Stella's just answered it incredibly articulately, so I feel bad following that up. But yeah, it's about representation and removing the assumption in the room. If you've got a product that is designed by people who are a certain way, look a certain way, whatever, as Priscilla said, they're only going to be catering for themselves. It's just a natural bias that you have when you're designing and building and making solutions to problems. So I think having women in the room it just gives us a voice, and it just means that we are being represented. And yeah, otherwise you get very boring products and ones that don't solve the problems that you need. And it's just so important to have that representation. But yeah, I think it's important from all angles as well. It's not just from, obviously the development is kind of key for me, but just the design is so important as well, and all the research, everything that follows it, everything that comes after it. You have to have everyone's room in the voice in the room.
Absolutely. And you know, Sophie alluded to it slightly there, but I suppose Prabha, in terms of like content writing, in terms of that side, is it similar? Is the importance in the same way, or is there anything different that means a lot to you in that respect?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything different between function within tech and tech overall. I mean, in addition to all of the excellent arguments around representation, which I agree with, I think it's just good business. And, you know, specifically where there's a ton of research out there that supports diversity in the workplace, whether it's gender diversity, race diversity, sexual orientation. We know that diversity improves products, it improves productivity, it improves, this is really important, companies' financials. So, you know, it helps their bottom line, which is, I think, incredibly important. You know, you posted the stat about 19% representation of women in tech. In large tech companies, that number this year is expected to be about 33%, which is pretty good, not good enough. So women are increasingly making tech purchases for themselves and on behalf of their households. So if companies want to sell to women, they will need to hire women.
Yeah, 100%. And Janet, yeah, I was just going to say, you've been in the industry for such a long time. I'm sure you've seen lots of interesting parts in your experience and your different roles within the business. Is that the same for you? Like, you've got your hand up, so I'm sure you've got something to say. I'll hand over to you.
It's that whole diversity, you know, bringing diversity to a team. It's not just for our customers, it makes the team work better. You know, without being horribly generalistic, you know, a lot of women bring a slightly maybe softer nature to a team. You know, we tend to be able to go, you know what, we did something wrong, or we're sorry, or, you know, and it oils things to a certain degree. I've genuinely found that, you know, teams with a good representation of women are more effective. They get to the end goal quicker and more harmoniously. You know, and actually at IBM, we're trying to extend quite a bit beyond that and not just look at hiring more women, but, you know, diversity in general, right across the spectrum. Because, you know, we are, and you get more innovation. You have different kinds of minds that have all technical, but subtly different skills, you know, and you bring all that to the party and you just get a better solution.
Yeah, it's really important. And Caroline, in your varying roles that you've had, particularly in that non-profit and that different side of you, what's the most important thing you think women can bring, and what's the importance of their involvement in the industry?
Sure. I mean, I don't think I can touch on anything that hasn't already been touched on, but I will say that I think sort of being that representative voice in the room, and even if it is not explicitly, but the things that we experience as women in our personal lives, in the way that we've sort of like been brought up, or our backgrounds, or how we go home at the end of the day, they shape us, right? And it shapes the way that we show up on a day-to-day basis. And I think that being like genuine to who that is and the experiences that you have, and showing up in that way on a day-to-day basis at work influences the products that you build, influences the relationships that you make in the workplace. And so just having that different perspective, whether you're considering a solution or you're considering, you know, team culture or strategy, or how we're going to approach a specific problem, I think that having those perspectives is particularly important.
And Molly, obviously you've covered such a range, from policy right through to having a product and a startup angle. Like, yeah, I guess I'm so sorry you're last, because the question has been answered so well.
Yeah, it's been thoroughly answered. No, I mean, I started my career living in Tokyo as someone who was obviously an outsider, and particularly in Japan in the late 90s or mid 90s, there were not that many people who lived in Japan and worked in Japan. And I always felt like I was both an outsider, but I also could get away with things and say things other people couldn't say. And so my teams liked it in a way. They could be like, oh, she's the weird foreigner. She said it, I didn't have to. So it was interesting. I've been the real minority in different contexts. And I find that sometimes that's you can use it to your advantage sometimes to get a better outcome.
Yeah, and being that voice in the room is super important. So I think that's incredible, and what a powerful place to start. So in terms of following on from that, and I think, you know, Molly, you maybe started to talk about it a bit there, in terms how much has the industry changed since you joined? So you mentioned that you started out in Tokyo. Have you seen a difference in that kind of attitude from now?
In terms of women in tech, or just in general in tech?
Yeah,
in terms of women.
in terms of the industry, but also women.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a lot more. I guess my main takeaway from coming back into tech now, I mean, I was always in tech, but from what policies should we use to shape technology uptake and scientific endeavor. That was the policy angle. So now coming back into actually building stuff and product development, it's more, I guess, assumed that technology doesn't just by existing improve people's lives, that we have to actually do some more work to ensure that. And there's obviously trends we've seen with, some of the major tech companies where people have lost trust. And so I think this is the change, is that there's a recognition that we need to not just be optimistic about tech for tech's sake, but be optimistic about the capabilities and the ways we can apply it, and then work on all the things around that to ensure that these good outcomes are achieved. So that to me is a big difference. And maybe it was just because I was really young when I started. It was my first career was tech. And I was like, tech is going to change the world. And then over time, I realized, oh no, there are some other factors in play. So that's the biggest change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. I think, for anyone watching this, considering
a career change to the tech industry. I think it's really great to know like how far it's come as well and how much further it has to go. I think that's shown a lot in the statistics we put in the video and kind of the things we've been talking about. So it's really interesting as women, but also just people working in the industry, what it's like for you. So Prabha, in terms of your various roles, like how much do you think the industry has changed since you joined, and have you seen a significant change?
Yeah, I've seen a huge change for women in tech, and for the better. I'll say that I truly believe it's a great time to be a woman in tech right now. And I think a lot of that actually has to do with the men in tech. I think that, the sad story, the sad state of things is that men are still in the positions of power in the majority of tech companies. They're still in leadership positions. But I think what's changed from my perspective is how they perceive women. And I think that's really to our advantage now. I've found a lot more male advocates and allies than ever before. And I think that they're doing a much better job of hiring women, promoting women. And I think that's just going to help us. So I'm all for women supporting women. I think that's tremendously important, but I also believe very strongly that men need to support women as well, especially in tech, in order for us to get hired and most importantly promoted. And I'm seeing a lot more of that advocacy.
That's incredible. It's really amazing. And Soph, if I didn't come to you at this stage as not only a woman in tech, but as someone that leads us all in a management role, I feel like it would be wrong. So in terms of your experience, how much has the industry changed since you joined?
I think it has changed a lot, and definitely for the better. There is still work to do. That caveat should just be carried through the entire rest of this conversation. But yeah, there's definitely been some really good improvements, particularly as we were sort of saying with the academy stuff earlier. We're seeing a lot more sort of younger women coming through, and I think that's to do with some of the more sort of systemic societal changes that are going on in terms of coding and computer science being taught at schools, and it being kind of a real thing that schools are pushing for in some areas now, to sort of get women into those STEM topics. So we are seeing a lot more women come through, a lot more women apply. There is a lot of work to do, but it has been really great to see that. And it is, much more so on some of the non-technical roles, but that technical side, the development roles, it is definitely increasing. It is really frustrating, that thing of, female developers, that quote, I think that was in the video, you don't want it to be female developers or female directors, you just want it to be developers and directors, but it's definitely getting a lot better. And I totally agree with the sort of male allyship. I think they've realised that they have no choice but to support us, and that it is genuinely for the better. But yeah, I think that is starting to get a lot better as well. But yeah, just from our personal experience in terms of what I've seen, and even just in my sort of friendship circles, people going into sort of technical space and not seeing it as something that's completely off limits and, a man's world, all that horrifying stuff. So it definitely feels like it's opening a bit, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I've, just a little bit, I've only been at Cube for 2 years. So I think I kind of missed, I wasn't in the tech industry before. I was in the charity sector, which has a whole different set of kind of top-down, men-driven kind of industry, but very different. And I must admit, my thoughts were it was going to be a lot more men, and being at Cube, you don't kind of see that. It's been very welcoming and kind of very easy to be a woman in that environment, in my experience. But obviously, I've come into it new, and I think Cube is quite far along in that. But it's very interesting to kind of hear these experiences from before. Janet, from your experience, how much has the industry changed since you've joined, since your roles have changed? Have you seen a big difference?
Oh, I mean, it's virtually unrecognisable from when I joined. I have to say this, I've always found the men in the industry very supportive. When I was a teenage girl, I didn't tell anybody outside the industry what I did, because the average bloke would run 20 miles in the opposite direction very fast, because it was quite intimidating. But, the joke was, when I went on my first departmental Christmas carry, there was 32 blokes and me, because the only other women were secretaries. It's hugely different now. My design lead, my top designer, is a woman. My senior technical staff member is a woman. We have a lot of the management team here across the organisation. I think we're probably about 40% women. You know, it may just be, I don't think that's endemic across IBM, but my particular bit is obviously doing quite well on the women front.
Yeah.
And we really do have a seat at the table and in all the major decisions, and you know, that's just so different.
That's a big difference from being the only one. So that's,
I mean, you have to remember, I was here but when they first kind of started using the internet and web browsers and all that lot, so it was very different back then.
It's unbelievable to kind of have that change though in what doesn't feel like quite that long. So incredible, kind of the difference from like my short time in the industry in seeing that is quite different. And Priscilla, from your point of view, you know, how much has the industry changed since you've joined the tech side?
Gosh, I haven't been in tech nowhere near as long as everyone in this. I worked within entertainment before, so I was more so that side. But I mean, I've only been here a short while. There's not really much much input I can make on this particular question. But I do want to really kind of, back the point that was made about allyship from men. And I think people need to realise what real allyship actually means. It's not just like a tick box exercise, or, you know, oh, we're going to celebrate the women in the office today, or whatever, it will put in some tampons in the toilet. Like, it's more than that. It's like we really need people to actually say, I'm actually deliberately going to seek out these talents and these people in these spaces, and we're going to give them the jobs, because I think it's just so important to do that, so people know that there's a chance of progression. I think that's another thing that a lot of women raise, that they kind of feel like they come into the industry and is there any chance of me getting to those roles? Am I going to ever become CTO or CPO, whatever it might be? So it's nice to know that you can progress within the industry. Not related to the question, but I thought I'd just say that I agree with that.
No, sorry, Janet, go on.
There's something, you know, which we're calling unconscious bias, and we're very, very conscious of it when we interview now. In that, you know, it's not a fault. It's just you can't help but have a natural preference to people that are like you know, so that have a similar background in a similar culture, or a female or male. So, you know, therefore, if you've got a bunch of, you know, middle-aged white men interviewing, guess who their preferred candidate is going to be, unless they recognise that unconscious bias and sort of go out of their way to structure their interview questions, for instance, and make sure that they're asking the right questions that gives everybody a fair advantage, and being really impartial to the answers as to how well they answered, and you know, squashing that natural unconscious bias. And I think, you know, that's quite important for us to get more diversity into the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Caroline, for you, obviously you've worked in lots of different kind of areas again. How much do you think the industry has changed since you first started out?
Sure. I think that one thing that I was reflecting on while listening to everyone else speak is sort of, in the role that I have right now, my manager is a woman, right? And it's the first time actually that I've ever worked for a woman. And it has been really like a different experience in the way that I show up to work on a day-to-day basis, and the way that we interact and solve problems together. And I think that, you know, years ago when I first started, that was an opportunity that I didn't really see being available to me, or something that would be sort of like possible in this industry. And so am sort of like struck on reflecting on that while listening to the other reflections here. I think to the larger point though, about men being allies and advocates, I wouldn't be in this industry if it wasn't for a man. I think that, sort of reflecting on the fact that my manager right now is a female, you know, I got my start as an intern, and it was a man who sort of saw that I had some skills in this work and was like, I think it's part of, you know, I would encourage you to sort of like continue to do this. And so I think that as we continue to be leaders in this industry, that is something that I hope to also bring to my work on a day-to-day basis, is working with young people who are underrepresented in this industry, not just women, but people of color, folks from different underrepresented communities, and understanding that, you know, I think often this work can feel like there is a barrier to entry for it. And you know, in the same way that doors were open for me in the past, because it was important to someone to be an ally, or not just a mentor, but a sponsor, is something that I look to bring to my work as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I think, you know, Shara and I were talking before when we were planning this, and we were like, sometimes we don't always feel like women in tech because we don't, you know, actually do the development. We don't actually feel like we do the kind of the coding side, and it can be intimidating in some respects because you're like, oh, I don't know if I should claim that space. And then you kind of sit there and you're like, you're really involved in what you do and it's your industry and you kind of want to be a part of it and you have a really valued role in it. And I think there's quite a lot of power in understanding that you can help that change. You can help women feel safer coming into that industry and asking questions. And, you know, I hope anyone that's kind of watching today, if you have questions about what it's like joining or being in the industry, I'm sure I certainly would, but anyone on this call would be happy to answer a question that you have around that. And I suppose kind of leading on from that is an interesting one around what advice you would give yourself if you were just starting out. It's kind of a question that I quite enjoy looking back. So yeah, if you were just starting out, what advice would you give yourself? And I feel like I have to start with Janet. Can you kick us off, Janet, please?
Okay, so don't keep comparing myself to other people, you know, all right, which predominantly was men, obviously, when I started, and, you know, my skill set and convincing myself I was inadequate, you know, like you say, because I wasn't the best coder or the best, because, you know, it took me a long time to realize that I am technical, all right, writing code is not my passion, but I bring a different skill set, which is equally valuable. It took me a long time to see that. I couldn't see the pluses that I brought. I just looked at the things and I went, oh, I'm not as good at that as them, or I'm not as good as that. You know, stand back and look at what you do well and what you enjoy and what you get a kick out of. You know, actually in your day-to-day role, what are the bits that you love? And then see if you can focus on that and expand your role around that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, can definitely resonate with some of that. And Caroline, you started to mention you had some really good insights in what it was like for you starting out and that experience. Kind of, if you could go back, what advice would you give yourself in that early starting out position?
Sure. I think the biggest thing, and this is something that I continue to like wrestle with and work on, is to be willing to like use your voice more and more actively. I think that one thing that shows up often in my work is that I can be a bit type A and I want to dot my I's and cross my T's and make sure that I understand what someone is saying and that I've looked at a situation from every point of view. But this is an industry that moves quickly, and to be honest, a lot of people in the room are not doing that. And so even if I'm like a little bit less measured, I may be more measured than some other folks who are also in the room already. And so I think that one thing that I wish I could have like told my younger self was, don't be afraid to speak up. You have like thoughts, you have valuable opinions, and there is a reason that you're sort of like taking a seat at that table. And so fully take that seat at the table.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. 100%. And Prabha, you were nodding your head during that. So I'm coming to you.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great point, and something that, you know, I wish that I'd told myself, or had you tell me, Caroline, when I first started out in tech, is to not be afraid to have your voice heard. Specifically in tech is a very meeting heavy culture, you know, 10 hours a day, back to back, context switching constantly, right? And you'll go to meetings, and I've witnessed this many times, go to meetings and there'll be a small group of people there, but some of them won't say anything. And I'm a firm believer that if you're not going to talk in the meeting, you shouldn't bother going to the meeting. You're there because you have a perspective, your presence is important, your voice should be heard. And specifically for women, really the only way that we get ahead is to have our voices heard and to speak up. So I firmly believe that we need to advocate more for ourselves, advocate more on behalf of what we're seeing and observing in the workplace and in the product. And the way to do that is to speak up when we get the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Molly, what's your kind of go-to piece of advice for your younger self?
It's funny because people come to me and say, what advice would you give me? And to get into tech, I never had a career plan. I never had a plan to get into anything. I did what I was always like mission driven and passionate about issues. And so I did whatever I thought would help me progress. I think young people who are in very structured environments or think they need to go through, a training program or whatever, I would say it's okay. Like you will, if you don't go through the training programs, or you don't get all of that, you can still be successful. But I probably would recommend to myself to be a little more structured earlier in my career. Because I never have had that sort of embedded down training in something. It's always been startup world. So I think, not necessarily being one extreme or the other is probably good.
No, I think it's really powerful, and actually some questions are coming around like at the moment, and I'm just kind of highlighting them that kind of cover that about the structured study route, which we'll come on to in a minute. But I think it's really important to remember there's kind of not one route to any of this. There is lots of different reasons how people get here, and I think that's a really powerful message, and I think we'll make a really interesting point to discuss. Debbie's asked a question, so in a little while Debbie will get around to answering that. Priscilla, obviously you're new to the industry, but what advice would you give yourself starting out in any of your roles? What would be the key thing you would share with everyone today?
Yeah, it's definitely quite interesting when you come in as like a non-techie tech person and you're sitting in and people are discussing sprints and all these different things, and then you hear one person say something and they're like, I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my God, what the hell? Now, I would just say, first and foremost, don't ever second guess your input in that structure. You work in different spaces. They can't do what you can do. You can't do what they can do. Nobody here is better than anyone else just because one person uses certain lingo and maybe you don't understand it. I think that's very important, because I feel like that might be a barrier to entry for some people, thinking that like the tech world is centered around a lot of these techie words that you might not be able to understand. And as you grow, and if you've got a supportive team, you will pick up on stuff because you have to. It's quite relevant for my role. I speak a lot with like the product team, understanding, what releases are going out so that I'm able to then communicate that to our audience. So you will kind of get that, but just never second guess the fact that your skills are transferable in that space. Yeah. And also never second guess your input as well in those spaces. I think it can be very easy to feel like, am I coming in with something relevant here? But it is like, who says it's not relevant? Like you guys are saying, like, go forth, say what you need to say and be heard in that space. And if you don't feel heard in that space, say it again. And one day they will listen. It's just very important. I'm quite a big believer in sometimes just going with your gut. Obviously, don't be silly and stand up in front of the room and start shouting. But if you've got something to say, table it across. And as long as you've done your due diligence, then I feel like people will then see that you're quite valuable in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And Priscilla, like my experience is very similar to yours. And I would just say, like, ask tons of questions, like never be afraid of asking a question. If someone's using an acronym you don't understand or word you don't understand, everyone loves talking about what they do and sharing their experience. And certainly, my experience of the industry has been like, everyone has been extremely welcoming and extremely willing to sit down and explain to me like what it is that they do and how their role is part of that wonderful puzzle piece that comes together to create a product. So yeah, like ask tons and tons of questions. Sophie, what's your advice to younger Sophie?
Younger Sophie, I'm still younger.
Even younger.
Even younger Sophie. Mine's kind of a mixture of really a lot. I think a lot of women have a lot of common problems. So a lot of what's already been said. I think for me, starting out, where I had no experience in tech at all, I didn't know the difference between, iPhone, Android or anything. I think I minimized my sort of value for a long time when I first started, and I was very much like, well, I'm just here to, make tea or order lunch or whatever, and I'm just trying to help you, your developers, you guys are like gods, like I can't possibly have any contribution that's as valuable as yours, and you designers, I don't have a creative eye, so I can't possibly have an opinion on that. And it was very kind of just there to sort of not serve, but just really kind of minimized my input. And it was only really when I kind of thought like, oh, I can have an opinion on this, I'm capable of learning enough to be able to contribute to this, and have an input that, yeah, I think that was a real sort of game changer for me. And I think that is a big thing for women, because I think the thing you were saying about asking loads of questions, women will tend to go, oh, I don't want to ask a stupid question, or this is a stupid question, but can I just say this? Or I get people sort of, you know, they ask questions after the meeting because they don't want to say something in the meeting and risk looking stupid. And I don't think that's something that occurs to men as often. Again, big generalization, but I think as a woman, that thing of minimizing yourself and your input is a real sort of a thing that happens as a result of society and everything. And I think that would be the thing that I would say to my younger self would be, your input is valuable and you're capable of learning more to contribute more. So that would be that.
Yeah, really powerful.
It's a really valid point. You know, there's two things there, isn't there? I mean, half the times when you ask what you think is that stupid question, you watch the eyes of everybody in the room and they will go, oh, thank God she asked, right? Yeah. And the other thing is the why. You know, sometimes we all rush off down a rabbit hole and we go, you know, and actually sitting there and stepping back and going, why are we doing this? Is there not a different way to do this? And, you know, as those why questions have, you know, turned into transformational projects that probably got me where I am today, just from that asking stupid questions, if you want to put it that way. So yeah, there is no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is when you repeatedly ask the same one.
Yeah, that's super annoying. Don't do that. But yeah, I think challenging stuff always it ends up with a better product, better solution, whatever it is. And I think if you're just sat there thinking, well, I'm just lucky to be here because I don't have the experience in tech or anything, like, you still have experience as a human. So you can still, if it's particularly around product, you can still say, well, hang on, as a user, I don't know, or I don't like how that looks, or whatever. You can still contribute. You don't have to be, kind of what Caroline was saying, it doesn't have to be perfect to be kind of valuable. So
yeah, really amazing. I think I'm going to dive into some of the questions because we've got quite a few questions coming through. I know there's some more things I could sit here and talk to you all about, and trust me, I'm trying to hold myself back from carrying on too much. So I'm going to start going through these questions just to make sure we can get everyone's questions answered while we're here. So I mentioned Debbie's question a little bit earlier. Debbie has asked, is there a structured study route to take to get involved in different areas of technology? And what paths did you take to get where you are today? So I think some of you have actually mentioned your path already, but does anybody particularly want to add anything additional in this area, or do you want to start just picking on people? I can do that.
So I do a fair amount of recruitment, and people are a little bit surprised when we recruit for IBM that, you know, we don't want necessarily computer science, or, you know, we tend to want, I was going to say a degree, but even that's not true anymore. We used to tend to want a degree that proved that you could learn a technical subject to a deep level. But actually, you know, the industry moves so fast that what you learned yesterday is not what you need to know tomorrow. So really what we're looking for is the ability to demonstrate that you can pick up new skills rapidly. And then, you know, the whole interview process is equally as important to make sure that you're personable and that you work with a team. That's really important. You know, you can work as part of a team. But then, you know, I say the degree, but we now take apprentices as well, and they are working out really successfully. So, you know, I feel sorry. I have a child who's that sort of, you know, make decisions about what you're going to do. And I feel really sorry for them because, you know, what do you want to do? You've got to know, and you've got to go to college. And you think, I still don't know what I want to do now, for crying out loud, let alone back then.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think you have to stress too much. I think if you've got an area that you're passionate in, then follow that. If it's technical, and take it to a depth, and that will probably be enough in most environments.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Does anybody have anything else that they wish to add in that particular area?
Just, I totally agree with that. I think I mean, my degree is in philosophy, so it definitely wasn't anything even vaguely relevant, but I loved it, and it, you know, I'm glad that I did that before I came into it. But yeah, I worked in finance for 5 years before I was here. I had no experience at all. I think the main thing is just, you know, when we recruit, we don't require a degree or anything like that. All we're looking for is people that are, you know, really passionate about it and have got different experiences. Sometimes it's really interesting to see the different paths that people have taken. If you've got someone that's been to university, that's done a computer science degree, they're going to have different sort of learnings from someone that's been coding since they were 7, and there's quite a few of our guys that sort of started with taking a Raspberry Pi apart and kind of getting obsessed with it that way, and then building their own thing. And experience is just such a huge part of that as well, because it isn't even specifically from a technical perspective about what you know. A lot of it is actually how you work with the other teams. You can be the best developer in the world if you're not a great person to work with, or you're not playing ball with everyone else, following the acceptance criteria, that sort of thing. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to be part of a great sort of team. So, and also I don't think it's ever too late to switch. I think there's so much out there now. There's so many ways of learning out there that you can. It doesn't have to be the traditional route. So
yeah, I think that's really powerful. And that part around transferable skills, like really looking at what you're good at. I think it came up earlier, like understanding what you're passionate about, what you enjoy and what you're good at, and really striving for that, I think is really, really powerful. And as Soph said, being able to work with the team, certainly from our perspective, from my particular role, talking to the team was really important in my learning process, in learning how Cube works and the process here. And I certainly found every developer I've spoken to has managed to explain it to me, someone that's not very technically minded, or certainly wasn't before I joined Cube, and actually taught me so much. And that was a really valuable way to learn and to experience, and kind of set me off on a really good path to understand much more about how you build software. So yeah, we have some more questions. Sorry, Caroline, go.
No, just really quickly, Gabby. I think one thing that is pretty common in the States is that women are less likely to apply for a role if they look at the requirements listed and don't see that they meet at least 80% of those requirements. And that does not apply to men. They are far more likely to be like, I think I can do this job, and then generally apply for it and go through the interview process. And so I think just one thing that I would encourage is apply for the job. If it's something that you are interested in, if it's something that you think you are generally, have the skills for, you have the experience for, even if you don't check every box that is in the requirements list, there's something that you bring to the table, and you can both learn something through the interview process if you're fortunate enough to get an interview, and it's likely that you could potentially go through and gain that role. And I think that that's something that I have observed and seen over recent years, and was something that happened to me in sort of going through a role. And I was like, should I apply for this? And it was a man who told me, just apply and see what happens. And so I think taking the chance, taking those risks, and being aware that that caution is not happening with other folks who are applying for that role is something that I would encourage.
I was just about to say, just adding on to that a bit, and what Janet was saying, I'm hiring very soon and looking for people. And, sometimes I have to outsource, sometimes, but I really want to build a team. And so the thing that I'm always looking for are younger people who are willing to, I don't know everything at all, but there's so much, as you say, Janet, it's moving so fast that we just need to all come together as teams, and we each bring value. If you're, every time we've built something in one thing for a year and a half, suddenly something new comes along, you think, oh, I better rebuild it in that, So we're constantly just in that learning process. And to the thought that there's a right answer is where you have to do this training program and then the jobs will open up. I'm sure there are some things like that, but that's certainly not what I look at when I'm looking at people. I'm looking at a team who can really work well together and overcome problems together.
Yeah. Janet, sorry, I think you're on mute.
What Caroline was saying, I fully agree. We've almost started to restructure our job profiles now and take out loads of stuff from required and put it in it would be really nice if you had some of, because we recognize that, like you say, it's not just women, but certain groups will go, oh, I need all of those impossible things. And, the way we used to structure it made it sound a bit like you did need all of those. And most of them are, in fact, nice to have.
That's really interesting around that, like having the confidence yourself to go for it, but also seeing organizations pivot how they're presenting the roles to accommodate for that. So I think, really powerful messages to share there. So just going to move on to some of the other questions, and this one relates very much to what we were all discussing earlier on in the discussion, was how can we promote male allyship and a healthy space to have this dialogue amongst men in the workplace? And second, ensure that it feels safe for men to voice themselves authentically without the worry of saying the wrong thing, so we can all progress together. So I don't know if I think most of you were mentioning male allyship and the fact that you'd felt the industry very supportive, but I don't know if anybody wants to kind of share any of their experience around how we can make this and we can promote to make it a safe space for male allyship.
Yeah, I'd love to add something there. One of the really powerful ways I've witnessed this at Apple is via our employee resource groups and diversity networks. And so we had women at Apple, Black at Apple, Pride at Apple, South Asians at Apple. And, you know, for the women at Apple group, we were very deliberate in making sure we extended invitations to men to come and speak to the women at Apple group. Because I think it's extremely powerful to have a man on a panel in front of a large audience of just women in tech. They really can't avoid the subject of women in tech when you're surrounded in a room with just women. And so, and we don't mean to put them on the spot, but really it's a way for them to see, look at all the women who you work with who are looking for allyship and advocacy. So I think actually inviting them in, allowing them to speak about their experiences is actually really important. Again, as much as I think it's great for women to support women, I think we really, really need to get men up there also advocating for us. And so one of the ways to do that is to actually have them speak. So at panels like this, you know, women in tech, I think it would be great to have one where you have a man on the panel as well to talk about their experiences, bringing up women and promoting women in tech.
Yeah, we actually did. It was something we did bat around, to be honest, and Soph is nodding her head. I think it's really important that men are part of the conversation, but also I think, you know, giving women their chance to express themselves. So there's definitely, I think, you know, men are naturally more privileged and in our experience, usually more comfortable at saying how they feel in an environment. But I think making sure that as women, we have those conversations with men is certainly something we can do. And I think often if you are more confident in having those conversations for people that are less confident is a really powerful way of doing it. Is there any more kind of important things we want to add in that particular question?
No, I would agree with that. It's all... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Janet.
Oh. It's, you know, it's that walk a mile in someone else's shoes, isn't it? You know, that's the important bit. You know, we've had a lot of education, some of it formal, but I found the most powerful things that we've had, you know, in response to the Black Lives Matter stuff was people who are Black telling us the challenges that they face, real people saying real challenges, because I'm not Black. I've never faced them, you know, and until you hear it in someone else's words and see that emotion and realize it is really, really powerful. So I think, you know, allowing, like you say, men to come into these sort of groups and hear firsthand the experiences that women may struggle with.
Yeah,
they can, you know, they can't be expected to understand otherwise.
Yeah, one of the things that in our response to not having a man on the panel that we did do very proactively was advertise this to men. One of the really key things we wanted to do was make this a safe space for men to come and learn more about what it is like to be a woman in tech. And I don't know the numbers, I can't see who is here, but it'll be very interesting to see. And I hope we have some men that have joined us today and are, as you rightly say, Janet, living, seeing what it's like to be in our shoes for a day. Priscilla.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. So I think that in order to be an effective or good ally, should I say, because I sometimes feel like the word gets thrown around and people don't really know exactly what allyship, what should I say, means. I think in order to be good, a good ally, especially in this space, you've got to really want to understand why that person's, whether it's like representing them or having them in this space, is important. I think sometimes because people are like a bit fearful to talk, they end up dancing around the subject, nodding and like, okay, that's fine, I'll sign up to this or I'll come to your talk, but they actually don't care to understand. It's really important to understand why the contribution of women, all these other minority groups is important for you in your own role and just for society in general, because I think that genuine need or that like wanting to understand is going to really allow you to open your ears and listen to what they're saying. I mean, we just spoke there about, for example, the talks that were taking place in IBM about Black Lives Matter. It's all well and good because people can sit around in a room and discuss that. But if you're not really willing to understand what the implications of these things that are happening in these systems, if you're not really willing to understand why systematic racism, all these things are in our systems, are, if you're not willing to understand why these are affecting the people and what you as a person can do to help change that, then nothing's ever really going to change because you're just there to tick a box. So I think there has to be a shift. There has to be this new awakening and this natural way of educating people on why you want to see this representation in these key spaces. So I think it's just really important to like find ways to educate, whether that's talks. Obviously you have to find what works best with your working groups. People work in different environments, some work in massive groups. Just mentioned there about like, you know, groups dedicated to Black people, South Asians, whatever it might be. And then really, as you mentioned there, about opening up those spaces for people to come in and have those conversations, I think is often very, very, very important, because otherwise people just don't know what to do. So I think it's just really good to do away with the BS, as I can say, and just really sit down and have real conversation and not be scared. And you have to really create a safe environment for people not to be scared to say something that might be a bit like, did you really say that? So that you can unpick it and then they can learn and they can develop from that, for sure.
Yeah, I hope that's answered your question. Moving on to some of the other questions, and they are coming in thick and fast. So yeah, I will just keep throwing them as we go through. We've got one here from Karen. Karen works for an SME in the UK space industry. On her most recent recruitment drive, they had lots of responses from a very diverse range of backgrounds. However, sadly, gender wasn't one of them. So Karen is asking like where and how they can perhaps advertise to attract more female identifying applicants. So I know we've mentioned a little bit about recruitment, but does anyone have any particular advice they can share around how you can advertise to attract more female identifying applicants? Sophie? You're very good at this. Come on, Zoe.
So I think there's definitely things you can do in the actual adverts themselves. This is sort of the very basics of saying that we are looking for people, you know, who fit this sort of bill. But also I think what Janet was saying earlier in terms of taking out it is important to have this or experience in this, and just saying these are the skills or the possible things you might need to learn. Because I think, as Caroline was saying, like a lot of women will look at an advert and think, oh, I can't do that and I can't do it perfectly, so I won't try. As opposed to having something that reads in a way that you think, oh, I could do that. And if the support's going to be there and the allowance is going to be there for me to learn it, then that's great. I think from personal experience from doing recruitment, a big part of it is the actual reaching out to women. So not waiting for women to come to you, but going to women. I don't know how viable that is in that SME, but you know, talking to people, saying who is the best woman that you've ever worked with, put me in touch with them. Is there someone that you know that you think that would be good for this, that might need a lot of training, but we can train them, we can do that. And you know, going through all your networks and your networks and actually going to women, because then when you have more women on board, it shows women that you are sort of taking that seriously, and they're more likely to apply if they can see perhaps that there are other women in there. I don't know, with this company it might be if they've looked at the percentages and gone, oh cool, there is a 1% women to man ratio, I don't want to work there, then that might be part of it. So you have to, you know, kind of sometimes I think be proactive and actually reach out rather than wait for people to come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, Karen, if it's your team, you know, putting faces and names of the team that people will be working with can be great in breaking down that barriers, being like, oh, women are here, you know, it's welcoming to women. I certainly think that really helped when I was looking at Cube, because I got to see some faces and names, and I got to see that there was women in the team, and there was also a nice mix, which certainly made it a bit more comfortable
from my perspective, trying to move into the tech industry and not knowing tons about it, but having the very wrong or right assumption that it was very male dominated. So I think there's lots of tricks you can do there, but Sophie's advice, thank you, very powerful there. Priscilla, sorry.
So just some dedicated job boards as well that you potentially contact them that target women in specifically. So like could be women in tech. There are so many different job boards. So if you find that maybe you're lacking in a certain area, I know like in London we've got like BYP for Black young professionals that businesses can advertise if they're trying to expand on that reach. And then you've also got like I think it's Tech Women London, if I'm correct, that also advertise towards women in London. So there's loads of boards that you can check out as well so you can narrow down.
I know it's not as transparent potentially, but I do get a lot of people just contacting to say, hey, I'm a business. Well, I tend to work in tech and energy, the intersection, both very, very, especially energy, very male dominated. So I have networks now where internationally people will come and say, oh, I'm looking at Europe, like who should I talk to? And inevitably I'm making more introductions to women than maybe if they'd contacted someone else. So I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. I think it's maybe a bit of an American thing as well. Like I'm so used to information interviews and networking, and I always try and give my time if I can. But that is how I sort of end up unconsciously, I guess, supporting other women too and saying, oh, have you seen what this woman does? And I once, when I was setting up Energy Unlocked, which is the business before you, I reached out to a very prominent woman in tech and finance, and she said yes, she would speak at my launch event. And it sort of, I feel like that's the kind of thing women can do to kind of raise the profile of younger women as well, and help them to sort of be a magnet for others who are trying to hire and bring women in.
Yeah, really powerful. Prabha, I think you.
Yeah, really quickly on the subject of job descriptions and recruiting and the interview process, the way I've heard it represented is that men are evaluated, women are evaluated on their experience, but men are evaluated on the potential. And that automatically puts women at a disadvantage. And so one of the ways that I'm starting to see the industry, and I hope for those of you who are in positions where you're hiring managers or working with recruiters, where you can change the industry, is to, as Janet mentioned, strip out things from the job requirements so that women can think about themselves more as having the potential for this role. But then also in the interview process as well, try not to be as sort of forward or backwards looking, and ask people to relate a ton of things about their experience, because if women feel like they don't have the experience, then they're not going to talk about it, they're going to shut down. So I think the way to do that is to really sort of focus a lot more of the interview on the potential and the skills that they bring to the table that give them the potential to do the job or perform in this role. And so I think that we really have to change the way that women think about themselves as part of the process. So we do have the potential. It's not just about our experience, it's about our potential, but also the way that the job descriptions and the interview process sort of work against us in many respects.
Yeah. Priscilla.
Sorry, Gabby, can I just chip in? Because Karen asked a question that she'd actually reached out to a job board, and first thing I wanted to say is, depending on your budget, because I know that's always a thing with job boards, it can be a bit crazy. So if you've got to be a bit more savvy, or maybe money's tight, a couple of things, there are numerous like women networks and groups that maybe are not specifically targeted to women in tech, but they're just like community or like networking based groups that you can potentially just either make a donation to help the work they're doing, and ask them to post the ad on like their website or send an email out to their community. A perfect example, I run like a women's network in London called the Conversation Network, and something like that would be great. We could email that out. We've got like 6,000 people on our email database that we could get that information out to. So it's like little things like that, or Slack. Slack is great for that. I mean, you might get bogged down with the notifications, granted, but join in Slack and reaching out to the organisers and asking if there is a channel maybe for women specifically, or creating that channel. I think a lot of women in the space would congregate there, and then maybe you could start to make those connections that way, and then advertise it, you know, through that, because it's free. So yeah, definitely those ways.
Thank you, and I hope that has answered your question, Karen. So lots of great advice. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a few questions here which are coming through, which is specifically about getting, you know, transitions into the industry and career changes. We have one from an anonymous person, keeping all the mystery going on who it is, asking the panelists what advice you can share to give people who don't have enough resources or networks, but still want to be successful in their transition of career to tech or engineering. This person has shared that they have applied for mentorships and have done lots of reaching out to people on LinkedIn. But maybe you can share some other ideas that they might be missing. They have also said a big thank you to all our amazing panelists for opening the way to the next Women in Tech too. So lovely little comment there to share. So the kind of main things are, is there anything that you can think of outside of mentorship and LinkedIn that they might be missing in terms of supporting that transition into the tech or engineering industry? My thing would be definitely do the reach outs and asks, because I think, you know, in all the different industries I've been in, I've found that people are very willing to share, particularly women, their experiences. So don't be afraid of asking. It sounds like you're doing that, but certainly keep up with that, because I think, you know, people are very honest about what that is like. We've mentioned Cube Academy, obviously, and those kind of entry points that we very much advocate and offer. So, you know, Janet's mentioned IBM has a fantastic internship program, and also has kindly put a link, which I've just seen pop up in the chat facility, to have a look at. So kind of they would be tips that I would definitely suggest. I know there's some great mentorship programs out there, which you've mentioned already, and a lot of those now focus or have, you know, tech focused on that. I know a colleague of mine was doing a really fantastic one. I can't think off the top of my head what it was called, but she is also a woman in tech, so there are lots of information available out there. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to share with our anonymous mystery question asker? No? I think we've covered quite a lot around this particular in our advice to our younger selves and being bolder and kind of going out there and seeking answers. So hopefully that gives you a bit more information. We've got one here which is fairly similar, but what advice would we give someone who enters the tech industry but isn't quite sure exactly which role is right for them, particularly when coming from a business degree? So I know we talked a little bit about this. Is there any advice you can share?
So I had a business degree coming into tech, so I can speak from personal experience there. I think there are a number of non-technical roles that are a great way for folks with non-technical backgrounds to get into the tech industry. The specific functions I'm thinking of are largely in marketing and communications, as well as product development and product management. I'm sure Caroline has more to add on that, but there are a number of people with business degrees. In fact, every single product manager or even program manager I know at Apple came there with a business degree. So I think that those are great entry points into tech for women. But I think even then, when you get there, being able to speak the tech language fluently is really, really important. So even if you don't have the tech background, you really should learn about it so that you're able to converse with the engineers and represent the product and build your product requirement documents and do all the hard work. And that does require, even if you don't have the degree, that does require at least understanding the tech stack.
Absolutely. And in terms of that place to research, to understand, is there, covers some of the questions that we've got coming through. Is there a go-to place people should look to understand more about what that kind of tech stack and the different choices and the processes, which I know are all varying depending where you're from, but to get a bit of that baseline tech understanding?
I think think one thing I would add around this question is, especially larger tech companies, there are so many functions outside of just like the product development process. To the point that was made earlier, if you're thinking about like, you know, business development relationships or customer support or product marketing or just regular marketing, and all of those functions are really good ways to get to know the tech side of the business, because you have to in order to create biz dev relationships or find partnerships or to market the product. And so sometimes getting your foot in the door in those like larger organizations and companies through sort of like a different channel of work, and then you will spend a lot of time talking to people on like the product and engineering and product design side of the fence, and, you know, finding ways to create some like synergies between your work. And if it's something that really feels as if you are interested in, I think that, you know, my experience is that in a lot of companies, they are open to, especially someone who has been there and proven that they can do the work, having someone transfer over to, if you want to be more involved directly in a tech related role. So to the point around sort of like business degrees and tech, they are everywhere. And I think that there are a lot of like different functions that you can start getting involved in if at some point you want to make a transition to the other side of the I shouldn't say the other side of the fence, to like the sort of like migrate over.
Janet.
You know, I agree with everything everyone said. You know, you come to a place like IBM, at some point somebody's going to say, why did you want to come here? You know, and the fact that you've taken some time and you've researched what IBM does, and you've got some idea of what you'd like to do, and you can talk with some passion about something, you know, one of the many things that we've produced relevant vaguely to the area that you want to go into, and you can demonstrate that you can talk at a vaguely technical basis. You know, we're not talking about you sitting there and writing code on the spot, but, you know, you can have that conversation. But it's the passion, it's the fact that you're really enthusiastic enough to have done a bit of work. And, you know, and actually, let's be honest, if you can sit down with an interviewer and you have a nice, interesting conversation for half an hour, rather than struggling to get through and firing questions and get responses, you're going to leave a better impression.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say it's like anything, like you want that culture fit to fit with you. Like we spend a lot of time at work. It's a lot of our lives at work. Like do something you know you're going to love and you're going to fit with that team and that ethos and that culture. And like part of that really comes from that research and understanding what the main drivers are for the business, kind of what makes you tick and what makes the business tick, and finding that synergy between the two. So yeah, certainly that research is a really key part of not only putting your best foot forward, but making sure that you're going to be happy in that role as well. I think, to be honest, we have probably answered in some roundabout way, and I hope everyone's okay with that. Some of the questions, quite a few which are coming through, are in similar realms of that initial kind of how you get through, how you break through into the industry. What I would say is I'm always more than happy to answer any questions. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty sure, speaking on behalf of our guests, that they would also be happy to answer any questions. So you're more than welcome to filter those questions through me for people, or reach out directly. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all of you. Like, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to discuss a topic which was so important to us, but you know, and share your own personal experiences in the way that you have done today. I'm going to hand back over to Shah, who I believe is in the studio. I've been waiting to say that for so long. Shah, look at that, seamless. Kind of. I mean, I could keep talking if Shah's not there. It's just me and you, so. Cool. Well, it doesn't look like Shah is coming back on the screen, so I am just going to say a big thank you again to all our panelists, and Shah is there. Amazing.
I think there was a bit of a time lag, but hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. So just, yeah, what an amazing panel. It was so interesting. And just echoing what Gabby said, like a massive thank you to all the panelists. Usually what we do, just to say a big thank you, is to donate to a charity or plant some trees. But obviously, in light with everything that's happening at the moment, we are going to be doing a £5,000 donation to UNICEF to sort of help families out in Ukraine at the moment. As well as this, just from the event, we will be doing a follow-up blog and sharing all the videos, and also just sharing the highlights. So that will be making its way into your inbox in the next few days. And then last but not least, I will let you carry on with your Tuesday, but I just wanted to highlight our next event. So this is our next Tech for Good Talks is around how can tech save our planet. So that is on the 26th of April, so just after Earth Day, but obviously, of course, it's going to have an Earth Day theme. And it'll be similar setup to the one that we've had today with some really amazing panelists. So please do sign up. That's live now, or you'll probably see it on some emails that we're sending out. And last but not least, thank you so much for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the panel as much as I did. And please do feel free to get in touch with myself or Gabby or anyone within Three Sided Cube if you've got any more questions or want to find out a bit more about us. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.